Good morning, everyone. Jim Laird joining you live from Diriamo, Nicaragua. The internet has been a little suspect this morning. It's usually pretty good. Going on live on Instagram here, so we'll see how it goes. It's just kind of part of the experience being here in Nicaragua, where I live. The internet's usually pretty good. So my goal on these things is to keep things really, I mean, there's obviously tons of content with hours and hours and hours of stuff, but most of you people don't have hours to sit and listen to things. My job as a coach is to condense things and give you what works and what is actionable. That's basically, when I was in Lexington and people paid me to tell them what to do, essentially, and do the thinking for them, so to speak. Now, I don't want to think for you. I just want to help you maybe think about things in a little bit different way. And, if you go on YouTube right now, there's all sorts of great information with people talking about inflammation and, low grade inflammation, inflammatory, insulin resistance being the root of all evil, all sorts of different diets for fat loss, obesity, all the things. The one thing you hear about, vegan, carnivore, keto, all these things, right? And I'm a strength coach. Been working with people for like 30 years. I actually got exposed to this in the late 80s. I worked out at a gym in Edmonton, Alberta, actually Sherwood Park, where I went to Salisbury Composite High School. And there was a gym there called Mass Appeal. And it was owned by a guy named Brian. I can't remember his last name. And his wife was Donna. They were both professional bodybuilders. And I think his brother or her brother was a diabetic. And, I started lifting there. I started, asking about nutrition and advice. And one of the things that he said was, hey, like, insulin is the king. Like, if you can control insulin, it can make you really huge or it can make you really fat. And so that was the first time I was exposed. And his brother one of them was a diabetic. And he was like, he actually has a huge advantage because he can use his insulin to get even bigger and really control his physique. And it's true. And so and a lot of bodybuilders started taking insulin after that, which a lot of endocrinologists really didn't understand. And he also taught me when I was like, this is like in 1989, 1990, that you didn't need insulin to absorb carbohydrates after strength training. So fast forward to 2001, I'm training a gentleman who's an attorney who's been doing a lot of marathon endurance training. He's type 2 diabetic. And we didn't change anything in his diet. The only thing we changed is we started lifting weights with him, and he eventually ended up competing in a powerlifting competition. It was pretty funny. He actually did very well, but his A1C dramatically got better. And his doctor was like, what in the heck is going on? Like, what's changed? And he's like, I've stopped doing ridiculous amounts of cardio. I'm walking and I'm lifting weights. And his blood sugar got way better. His A1C came down, his inflammatory markers came down. Everything was much, much better. And his doctor just couldn't believe. And I was like, it's because and sure enough, a couple years down the road, it started becoming like mainstream that you activate a different pathway when you lift weights, and you can absorb more glucose without insulin. You don't even need insulin to absorb glucose into the muscles after you strength train. So strength training is an incredibly powerful tool for diabetics. So over the years, I've seen all sorts of different things work. Granted, there's enough protein, and granted, there's enough sleep, and granted, people are generally taking care of their health. They get decent results. Obviously, I got into this quantum circadian rhythm world. You don't hear people talking much about how light, artificial light in particular, affects blood sugar and inflammation and cortisol. I think one of the reasons for that is because the main guy that bangs the drum on this, and I owe, Dr. Cruz, him, helping me find living a more outdoor life, which was a solution to a chronic issue I was having, reoccurring staph infections from a pedicure that I'd gotten. and they were getting out of control. And he was like, you need to get outside. And granted, I needed that fire and brimstone approach for me to make a major change in my life so that I could, it was getting bad. I mean, it was multiple infections a year. And so I changed my entire life. The problem, and I've got nothing personal against Dr. Cruz. I was part of his group for a long period of time. The problem is he makes these statements, these very inflammatory statements like, all you need is the sun. If you get enough sun, you can eat shit on a shingle, to quote him. And then he'll say, well, look at Usain Bolt. He ate chicken McNuggets and, set a world record. And it's like, I've got all of this anecdotal evidence of working with thousands of people over the years. Yes, as we've gotten people outside, as I've gotten people to get their circadian rhythm, their sleep better, to get faster, quicker results. But to say, hey, if you get more sun, you don't have to worry about what you eat. You can eat whatever you want. Just like people hear a statement like that, or they hear him say something along the lines of, oh, he's a food guru, and just like kind of crap on some really well-intentioned people, including some good personal friends of mine. People just kind of write somebody like that off and just don't, he's got great information that needs to be out there, but because of his stance and because of the way he presents things, and it's totally up to him, and I understand where he's coming from, he ends up basically, a lot of people just completely kind of like push aside what he has to say because of his delivery method. And it's unfortunate because if you start, I put some things in the description. If you start Googling around about circadian rhythm, blue light is this, you need blue light. So in the morning, that blue light causes you to get a big spike in cortisol to start your day. The problem is, and the road to hell is paved by good intentions, is in the order to save energy, we've taken the red out of, like, incandescent bulbs burn more energy because there's heat involved, because the red produces heat. Well, red is the opposite of blue. It's kind of the calming effect and the healing effect. The blue is the cortisol, the blood sugar response. And I actually experimented with this. Dr. Cruz talked about how, if you eat outside as opposed in the sun compared to eating indoors, when I first got into this, and I was like, I'm going to try this. So I basically fasted for a day. And then I basically at noon, I fasted for a day. So I'd have a baseline. At noon, I ate an entire stack of pancakes with maple syrup. They were damn good with butter. Sitting in my underwear at noon in my gym with all the fluorescent lights on, and then I took my blood sugar. And then a week later, I did the exact same thing. I fasted, okay? And then I ate a whole stack of pancakes outside at noon, and I took my blood sugar. Well, my blood sugar indoors was dramatically higher than it was out in the sun. So you start looking at circadian rhythms and breast cancer, like artificial light and breast cancer, artificial light and blood sugar, artificial light and cortisol. You start looking at this stuff, then you read, like, I put in the description below a link by John. You can look up John Ott PDF. It's a book, Health and Light, by John Ott. He was a time-lapse photographer for Disney. And he basically noticed, like, he had to get flowers to bloom. It's at perfect times for these films. And he noticed that they would bloom under certain light frequencies. Okay. And then he was like, wow, this is really crazy. And so then he started noticing animals were affected by light and sunlight and different light frequencies. So it's like, okay, when animals breed, everything's affected by hormones, everything's affected by sun. So we've created this world that you have blue only, which is the go hormone, which is like cortisol, blood sugar. And there's studies listed below that you can look into. So what do you think is going to happen when you have this low? Most of the people spend 90% of their day indoors. What do you think is going to happen when you spend the majority of your day under fake light that's basically telling your body to spike blood sugar and spike cortisol all day? And then your circadian rhythm is broken. You're not getting the melatonin that you need. You're not getting the light in the morning to set your clock. Your circadian rhythm is busted, which also controls, like, once you're sleep deprived, you can't control appetite. And so you have this, like, and you've got hyperpalatable food. So it's not one thing. It's not just the light. It's not just the food. It's all the things combined. And it's, like I talked about the other day, it's a symphony of destruction. So you have an indoor life combined with hyperpalatable, high calorie, cheap food, and people just can't stop eating, with this constant low level state of blood sugar spike and cortisol from the light environment, from scrolling on phones. And it's just this recipe for disaster. But then you have somebody come along and say, well, all you got to do is get outside. It doesn't matter what you eat. Just get outside and it's going to fix everything. Just move the equator. Everything's going to be okay. And there might be a little bit of truth to that, but it's not. I mean, I've got plenty of people that have made dramatic improvements by just getting outside a couple times a day and dramatically changing their diet in a good way. So it's rarely one thing. And if you look at most of the people in the fitness space, they usually go from one extreme to the other. It's usually like they're a vegan and they have health issues and they become a carnivore. And then, like, after a few, that carnivore really helps them. And after a few years, they find somewhere in the middle, like an omnivore. So I'm not saying you have to, like, live like the Amish. But what I am saying is that you might want to pay attention to the amount of time you spend indoors under fake light. Like, when I first got, like, into getting outside more, my eyes literally hurt when I went out in the sun. My eyes would water. Now it's the opposite. When I go into a store in Managua, I go into PriceSmart or Walmart or a mall, and very rarely here is there a building where there's no windows. Very rare. Like the gym I go to, it has windows at the top that let air in, and because the electricity here is expensive, so most places don't have air conditioning. Only these big stores can afford that. So very rarely here, even if you're in a house and they have, like, my house in here, all my windows are open all the time. I might have to turn a light on to get some more light because it's darker in my house, but I'm still getting natural light with red and green, all those things. Most people today are spending 90% of their time indoors under blue only, and they're not getting the red, the green. Go look at John Ott's stuff and you'll start to understand this. So I'm not saying the problem is you have extremes. You've got people that are like, it's just light, or it's just food, or it's just the chemicals or the toxins, or it's just this, or it's just that. It's in all these camps when it's the whole package. That's why the 5 fundamentals are so important, because walking outside 3 times a day, 10 minutes after meals, get you outside, gets you relaxed, gets more light in your life, cuts off that stress response, protein at every meal, high quality water, social connection. All these things give you aspects that work on everything that's causing the storm or the symphony of destruction, so to speak. So I want to make this really short and really simple. And if you want to dive into it, I've got a bunch of links below. Just start Googling circadian rhythm and health, blue light health. I would recommend, getting some red lights for nighttime, candlelight, get the lights down. There's lights you can dim. And then just throughout the day, like, try and get outside, try and get outside more. Try and spend, like, I do all my calls out here outdoors. I'm lucky I can do that living here in Nicaragua. So just give that a shot. I think it's a major contributor to the overall just mess that we're in. Getting people outside, getting people more active. There's another thing that really bothered me the other day. It was, Peter Attia, God bless him. Dr. Peter Attia was talking about weightlifting in adolescents and children, and how that they're limiting their ceiling by, like, not strength training. And I'm like, Peter, God bless you. I've been working with young athletes for the last 30 years. Kids need to play. They need to play. Like, their brain development is being affected because they're not playing. The weight room's great. You want to get a kid in a weight room, make sure they have a good coach, but we don't need more structured activities for children. They need to get off the phone, and they need to play on the playground, and they need to wrestle outside, and they need to climb fences, and they need to do stuff like that. That's what helps their brain develop. Kids don't need formal weight training programs. They have that. That's called play. It's called calisthenics. Like, if you look at kids in the 50s and 60s, they didn't lift weights. They were out on the monkey bars. They were doing calisthenics, and they looked fantastic, and they were strong. And that builds the foundation for strength training. But we're going to, it's crazy now. Like, you've got kids that are parents are paying to take their children to a gym so they can play. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So there are my thoughts. I hope you have yourself a great day. I hope you look into a lot of this stuff. But the bottom line is, like, a lot of people trying to make this so complicated. The bottom line is you just need more natural light. You need more real food. You need to walk and get outside and be active. You need to have social connection. Okay, it doesn't have to be fancy. A little goes a long, long, long way. You don't need to overcomplicate this. It's not rocket science. More fresh air, more sun. Get the lights off at night, the screens, the TVs, all that stuff needs to go. If you just get outside a little bit more, that's going to lead to your getting better sleep. It's going to lead to you making better food choices. It's going to make everything work better. And, all the advice that a lot of these people give is great. Like I've seen people dramatically change their physique and their health by just making some food adjustments. I just think you can supercharge it by improving your circadian rhythm, by fixing your sleep, and by getting more natural light in your life. Have yourself a great day. And don't forget to get outside.